Welcome everyone to the International Semiconductor Industry Group webinar. So it is with great pleasure that earlier this year we signed a partnership with DSCI, the Digital Supply Chain Institute, wonderfully pushed by Marko Kovacic, who most of you will not know, but will know after this call, who's the managing director. And of course, we're joined by senior fellow and subject matter expert Andre Solder. And they all give the whole industry who we are working with an insight in terms of what their strategies are, what is the ideal methodologies and principles to follow through within semiconductor manufacturing. For those of you who are not kind of familiar, which I doubt because most of you are members joining this call or have attended our summits. Our industry association is the International Semiconductor Industry Group, and our mission is connecting leaders, driving innovation and shaping the future of the semiconductor ecosystem. And of course, we'll give you a brief understanding or overview of our global reach and industry influence. Just so you're aware, so our group covers 5 different sectors. The first flagship element is the summit. As you will know, we're always sold out at every summit on a regular basis, on a global basis, covering 12 regional summits globally. We have a recruitment division, publication division, market reports division, and our new division, which is the investment sector. Our flagship platform covers every region that you think of in semiconductor manufacturing. And one of the beautiful things of partnering with DSCI is that when you look at all the continents involved around the globe, the key thing connecting it is supply chain. And this is the discussion that we'll be covering today. In terms of regional highlights, what one needs to understand in the semiconductor ecosystem, we are constantly looking at this key phrase, which is driving transformations across regions. In the US, of course, there's a heavy influence involved with the government policies, and of course, the public and private partnerships that are involved in the area. In Europe, the collaboration of leading research institutes and of course, shaping green semiconductor initiatives. In Asia, which is basically bridging East and West cooperation and promoting regional supply chain resilience. And of course, we're going to hear some success stories from our partner DSCI on those elements. So yeah, we're celebrating our 15th year anniversary, established in 2010. And the mission is to gather semiconductor manufacturing leaders to share ideas and collaborate in a trusted network, which is the similar mission but on a broader scale that DSCI is working on as well. For you guys who are familiar with us, these are the platforms that we are covering. We covered the US earlier this year, Taiwan, and upcoming is our Korea, Europe, Middle East, Southeast Asia and Japan summits. So yeah, thank you for all joining. Of course, our next summit is in Korea later on in August, on August the 27th to the 28th, and 27th, 28th, and already an incredible lineup is scheduled. So thank you. For now, I will pass the bat on to Marko and Andre, who will give you an introduction on DSCI and their initiatives and how we are going to collaborate with them to support the supply chain ecosystem, the supply chain challenges that we are facing in semiconductor manufacturing today. Marko, please.
Thank you very much, Salah. Welcome, everyone. As Salah said, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. My name is Marko Kovacevic, and I'm the Managing Director of Digital Supply Chain Institute. Today, I have 2 colleagues with me, and, we apologize for, one thing which we didn't have and didn't prepare on time on slide, and that's as well like live case with supply chain. You always have changes, you always have challenges. We have one more colleague here with us, which is Vivek Gelani. who is actually our director of research. And what we wanted to do is actually have Andre as somebody who is really who has been a practitioner in one of the large global organizations, and he will tell you more about it. And then and our senior fellow who works with us, focusing on problem solving from the other side now, and then Vivek as our director of research, because big part of who Digital Supply Chain Institute is that we are an applied research organization. And what we mean by it is, like, we started as a research organization only focused on supply chain transformation, especially the digital side across the industries. But then we have evolved based on our members' inputs into applied research. And what we mean by it is not only a word for us. Actually, what we mean by it is through all the research we do in different segments and areas of interest of supply chain transformation, we create either tools or actionable items together in member-to-member collaboration, which can resolve certain problems. So one of the things we'll share today with you is actually the approach towards one problem resolution, where we want to hear your opinion and see if you are interested to engage. Because for all of us here, and that's why I like working with Sala and like the institute, which he's leading and his team is, they're also practitioners in a sense of, trying to come not only on a high level sharing the ideas, but actually towards a tangible output, which can be measurable in your daily businesses, because otherwise we don't, create any value or a change in that aspect. So see the session we have as an interactive and something, where we learn from you and you learn from us, and then we see what we can build on together. So I'll pass it to Andre and Vivek to bring you, through the narrative, and then let's open a discussion and see where it can bring us. Andre, back to you.
Perfect. Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm glad that you were all able to join us today. I will get us kicked off and talk a little bit about the Constellation of Value and what the concept is, how it relates to supply chain, and why we're very excited for a potential collaboration around this particular concept. My background, just before we jump into it, I started my career as a consultant in high tech, spent about 7 years traveling the world doing that. I spent another third of my career, more or less, in an entrepreneurial venture in Asia. And then the last 11 or so years, I worked for a large technology company leading their supply chain strategy globally. And so lots of experience over the last few years in particular, across pandemic, geopolitical situation, and of course, a lot of movement around tariffs. So very familiar with our supply chains and the challenges that we face. I want to get started by talking about what a constellation of value actually is. What is the concept? And to be able to do that, I want to just briefly talk about how our supply chains exist today and how they are configured. And the reality around our supply chains is that they're still configured in many ways the way they have been for decades. And that is that they're largely linear. We buy materials from our tier one suppliers who buy their materials from their tier one suppliers, and so on down the line. And they're really built around these bilateral relationships along each tier. We don't have a lot of collaboration across tiers. We may have some collaboration with some of our most important and trusted suppliers, very few close partners. We may share with them some data around supply and demand. But if you take a survey across the supply chains, not just in tech, but everywhere, there is far less collaboration. And as a result, far less use of automation and advanced analytics than there could be. And that was really the starting point for us to think about what would be a different approach. How would we, in an idealized world, move forward, change the game to a point where we can have a shift, a large shift in the outcomes for everyone involved. And that's how we ended up at this notion of a constellation of value, which is essentially an intentional framework that drives dynamic, collaborative, and trusted networks. And those networks are both deeper and broader than what we have in the supply chain today. Deeper in the sense that they go multiple levels into the supply chain. So we're talking about relationships that aren't just tier 1, but really cover tier 2 and potentially tier 3 and tier 4 suppliers of critical materials or critical components that we have identified and know play a large role in our success. Broader essentially means that we don't just focus on 1 or 2 suppliers in each tier, but we try to get all of the meaningful suppliers within a tier to collaborate in the same way so that we can really extract the benefit of that collaboration. What's unique about the Constellation of Value is that it's built around a common goal or objective. So everyone is trying to accomplish the same thing. And by doing that, we hope to be able to improve everyone's outcomes and not just the outcome of the customer or of any one player within the supply chain. Often these constellations are built around shared data and not just data in the way that we share it today, where we may provide some data to a supplier so that they can optimize their planning and share some data further down the line. No, we're actually talking about a structured, secure way of sharing data, potentially sharing data in a way that we can apply analytics that help optimize and automate decision-making throughout the supply chain, but don't necessarily expose the actual data that we're sharing to other members or more broadly publicly. And to do that, we often partner with technology companies that can build these black boxes or these firewalled analytical engines that allow us to leverage the data across the supply chain in a way that was never possible before. To do that, of course, you need to build trust. You need to have a track record of doing that successfully, which means that these constellations of values are not something that you can build quickly. They really have to start small, prove the concept, build the trust, add new members, and grow them from there. So it's not a light switch situation. It's very much something that you build over time. What you get as a result is a much more connected and responsive supply chain. You get an environment in which you can move quickly, in which decisions can be automated to the large part, which drives a great deal of efficiency and hopefully makes everyone in the constellation more effective and more profitable. Maybe just before we move on, Vivek, I wanted to also just talk a little bit about how it's different, fundamentally different. And there are a couple of other elements I wanted to touch on. The first is we've already touched on the depth and the breadth, the shared purpose, and the goals. The goals themselves are measurable. Everything about the constellation is structured, which essentially means we have an organizational construct that everyone aligns with. We have a governance framework that is very clearly defined, that again, everyone has bought into. That governance framework drives accountability. There are consequences if people do not provide what they've signed up to provide and don't follow their roles and responsibilities. So it is very much a structured construct around achieving the goals. There are also 2 other elements to it that, as the constellation grows, are really important. The first is that absolutely it needs to remain agile and change over time. It is a model of continuous improvement. And as the Constellation of Value grows and expands, you will very quickly find new opportunities and potentially make some adjustments. And as I already mentioned, it also continues to leverage advanced and new technologies. So whereas we may start with a simple analytical framework, that may very quickly move towards using advanced AI and potentially Gen AI as it progresses. So with that, I want to just talk very quickly about why it matters. And Vivek, we can move forward. Great. So why does it matter? Well, we already talked about what the old framework looks like. It is a linear model that hasn't done very well in the last few years. Since the pandemic and potentially even before, we have seen numerous disruptions in the supply chain, not just in the tech supply chain, but most supply chains, and particularly around shortages, and problems with shipping and problems with availability of raw materials. That has been a repeated experience for those of us who've been in the supply chain for close to a decade now. We've wrapped that with geopolitical issues. We've certainly had our share of tariff and regulatory issues that seem to be ever changing and rapidly moving targets. And so the model that has existed until now simply wasn't equipped to deal with that. It really relies on siloed data. It really doesn't have the relationships. It doesn't have the trust, and it is easily disrupted. So then what is the benefit of moving to a COV model? COV model obviously requires a lot more preparation, a lot more commitment. It requires you to build trust. It's a much bigger effort than the model that we have today. We touched on a few of these, but I just want to highlight them again really quickly. The first is probably the most important, and that's that we just drive efficiency and lower operational costs. Through advanced analytics and the automation that it allows us to do, and I'll talk about a couple of use cases to make that real, it really does drive out waste from the supply chain, allows us to be much more efficient. It increases resilience. It allows us to be much faster, much more agile in how we respond to things. It helps us sense changes and therefore be much more resilient, hopefully avoid some of the traps of the shortages and the disruptions that we've suffered from. It can also help us drive transparency. We can use the same data infrastructure, the same relationships to help us really identify and drive transparency in the supply chain around such things as environmental and social compliance and others. It builds long-term trust, which can be leveraged in new and as yet unimagined ways for the organization. And ultimately, it drives customer satisfaction, especially if you find a way to integrate the needs of your customers, your biggest customers, within the constellation. So lots of benefits, potentially a significant lift up front and an ongoing maintenance required to make it work. But we think it's very much the direction that we need to go, given our experience over the last few years up to a decade. Let me pause there and any questions, any observations that anyone would like to put forth. All right, then I will move on. I want to take a couple of minutes before I hand it on to Vivek and talk about a couple of use cases. The first use cases is talking about supply continuity. I already mentioned, and everyone on this call surely has experienced some of the disruptions of the last few years. How does a constellation of value help us deal with improving supply continuity? Well, you can imagine a world where if you have the deeper relationships, the broader reach into the supply chain, and you're sharing data, that you can share data that today you would not be willing to share. And so that means today you might be sending a signal around your demand, which guides your tier one suppliers. But in the future, you might be able to include information about how you prioritize your demand in times of shortages or at certain times in your fiscal calendar. I'm sure at least some folks on the call will have the same experience that at the end of the quarter, their organizations may be prioritizing revenues, or they may be prioritizing volumes if they're working to maintain a certain market share. Lots of different prioritizations in the supply chain over time. And certainly those play a very significant role when there are times of shortages. If you are able to share that across a constellation, not only for your customer, but for yourself, and then your sub-tier suppliers are also able to share that. If that data becomes available, you can now make short-term decisions, and you can drive the analytics that optimize across the entire network and drive decisions that improves outcomes for everyone and allows you to dynamically adjust in times of shortages in a way that's simply not possible today. Today, if you have a shortage, if something doesn't show up in your factory, you simply make a decision and move forward. You don't have the time to make the phone calls, to engage with your customer, to do the back and forth, to have them do the analysis and to tell you what to do. By then, it's already too late. But in the future, in this framework, you could have the analytics that drive the prioritization, that tell you what you should be building for your supplier, that tell your suppliers what they should be building for you in a world where something has gone wrong and you don't have all of the supply. So it's a very powerful use case for this framework. Similarly, it'll also help you deal with very dynamic global political situations and tariff regulations. If you use the same data model and you have the same collaborative framework, you might be able to include data about the locations, the profitability, the margins, the capacities of all of the players within the constellation. Again, that data would be protected. It would not be visible to the other members of the constellation, but the analytics could drive a very rapid response to changes in tariff regulation. If, let's say, suddenly the tariff from China jumps to 145% in a country, then you should very quickly be able to run the analytics and see what are the alternatives that you have in your supply chain. How could you shift volumes? What would make sense given everyone's priorities and capacities and requirements in that? And you could quickly adapt the constellation and respond to the change. So it's another very similar use case. And lastly, we talked a little bit about transparency already. Let's talk specifically about environmental and social compliance visibility. It's very, very difficult for any of us in the supply chain to have trusted visibility into carbon, water usage, conflict minerals, forced labor, all of the things that we are obliged to monitor, to do due diligence on, and to report out on. But if you have a framework like the Constellation of Value, and you have the actual constellation built, you could again share data through that constellation that makes it very quick, that gives you a very quick sense of where you're at, where your risks are, where you need to focus your due diligence. It broadens what you're able to do, and it also allows you to move much more quickly. And over time, as you build trust, it should also boost the confidence with which you're able to report those things. It doesn't necessarily mean that you don't still have to do due diligence, even on members of the constellation. That's part of the responsibility and the requirement, but it simply provides a framework by which you could be much faster, much more agile, do it at a much lower cost, and potentially have a much broader reach. So just 3 cases. There are many, many others in the supply chain where this framework could be very useful, but we wanted to make it a little bit real and talk about 3 cases in our background where this particular framework would work really well. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Vivek to walk us through a little bit about the different types of constellations, and then how the collaboration that we're talking about here could help us move forward with this framework in the future. Vivek?
Thank you, Andre. Again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm Vivek Gilani, as Marco mentioned, Director of Research at Digital Supply Chain Institute, currently leading as a member-led research institute. We are leading for a few of the members' priorities in terms of research, including AI, ESG, and COV being one of them as well. So as Andre mentioned, right, what was COV, why it matters to most of the supply chain leaders, right? But then how you go actually build about it, how you approach COV, right? So when you think about building a COV, one of the most fundamental, decision that you have to make it, how will you go and structure it, right? Should it be internal or external? Should it be a private within your supply chain or trusted network partners, right? Would it be a public, open and collaborative solution? So let me define how you can go think about it. So before you come to this stage about how you structure it or approach it, before this, you have defined your shared measurable goal, right? Once you define that, based on the goal, if it's a very private, if it's a very concise goal that can be solved using few of the partners in your supply chain, then it can be a private COV. But then if your goal is to about creating an industry standard where all the members, including your competitors, can benefit from this, and you can also benefit from some of the things that your competitor and their suppliers or their value chain partners can provide, then a public COV can be helpful. So before this, once you define your shared goal, that will automatically impact how you approach the COV, right? And within that COV, even in a private or public, you'll have to think about participation, scale, how you want to share data across every governance and agility. So those will be the different factor once you decide on which way to go about it. Again, there is no one fit all solution here, right? Think about, are you struggling with a decision to go alone? Or is there a supply chain partners from your suppliers or the customers or even a technology vendor that could help you approach this problem and brings you the value? Again, when you think about this, think about the shared goal, but the next thing is just not the collaboration, as Andre said. It's about the type of collaboration that you need. Do you need them to share data? Do you need them to share insights? Because that will depend on how we'll select different participation, different members within the COV. Again, there are more details to go into each of the elements of each of the different types of COV. We actually have a playbook around this, which will be available to, I think, all the attendees as well. Before I go to the next step, please feel free to stop me at any time if you have any questions or comments in between. So we'll go into, once you decide to go into how ISIG and DSCI can help you with this, right? Again, everybody has tried in supply chain. We have seen from, at least from my perspective in the last 8 years, I've seen everybody that I work with has struggled with even building a cross-functional team in their company, right? People, just different leaders from different functions, don't want to share data, don't want to share expertise, don't want to share skills or talent, right? So how can you go about doing a cross-organizational network that will require much more on-hand effort, right? So that's where ISGI and DSCI could help, right? We are not just facilitator, but we are the architecture of the DCOV framework, right? We have worked with global organization and also tested the COV framework with few of our members as well. So that's where we can bring our insights, right? So we can bring structural methodology to make sure that we can help you define your purpose, your shared goal. We can help you align the stakeholders, identify value for each of the stakeholders, because that is also one of the main important part, right? And then if it's needed, we have done a value generation workshop, right? Where we'll do a call with one of the potential members, right? And try to facilitate a session where they can understand the benefits of being part of the COV as well. We'll bring the insights that will help you, right? To make sure that COV can be successful. So again, we'll bring the safe, trusted environment to experiment this. The thing about, if you have this framework and guidance, because it is publicly available, what would be the next step would you do to build a COV today, right? So that's where some of the next steps comes in, right? So take this checklist. These are actually the coming out of the 7 steps that we have in building the COV. So think of this as a litmus test for a problem. So think about a problem or an opportunity that you think could be solved by cross-organizational collaboration, right? Once you identify that, think about, is that problem persistent? Is it cross-functional? Is it difficult to solve with the current traditional process that you have? Right? Does it involve external partners, external organizations, sometimes even the competitors, if you're doing public COV? So if you go through all the checklists and the answer to all the questions is yes, then that's where COV could help solve that problem and create value across all the partners that you have. Again, as we mentioned, we have detailed information about each of the steps, how you go about building it. So let us know if you have any questions, and I'll pass it back to Marco or Andre to see if we have any questions that we could answer.
Thank you very much, Vivek. Thank you very much, Andre. We really tried to, share with you a concept that has been delivered, or developed from the experiences of last 4 years, focused learning from, actionable projects we have been engaged with, plus, sharing the successes and failures of practitioners leading large global supply chains, right? So it's not just a concept we try to develop academically. It's something which is purely applicable as we try to share in a very short period of time. And this we want to open together with the International Semiconductors Industry Group as part of the things that we can do together and focus through ISIG in a sense of tackling this topic in a structural way with tangible outputs we can define together for those who are interested. And in that sense, please, Sala, if you would like to add anything related to the overall approach, and then we can open up for questions, comments, ideas, maybe potentially disagreements. Sometimes these things also spark a valuable discussion.
Yeah, no, thank you, Andre, Vivek, for the overview. Much appreciated. To people in the audience, if you have a question, please simply raise. I think at the end of the day, over the recent years, I mean, our industry is always getting bombarded with unprecedented shocks, right? From the pandemic to even modern day geopolitical tensions, and that's of course tested what I would call the semiconductor industry is a complex but interconnected network. So I think at the end of the day, resilience isn't optional, it's essential. And I'd be intrigued to hear from the people that are here online. I mean, simply all you can do is raise your hand, or you can raise your hand on the not physically raise your hand, but there's a button that you can raise your hand at the top if you have any comments or questions. But I think at the end of the day, I think Andre and Vivek, you both clearly showed how collaboration at a scale can really assist. And I think that's the problem that we do see in our industry, the trust element behind it. But we do have an ecosystem mindset. I think one of the key challenges that one would take into consideration is, of course, the real-time visibility. Of course, now it is powered by data, it's powered by AI, it's powered by analytics. And I think the other key thing is diversification and friendshoring. This is another key element to take into consideration, reducing reliance on any single source and unlocking global flexibility. I know most semiconductor companies do have multiple sources that they deal with at the end of the day. How is it split? How is the ratio split? It's pretty much based on performance. The better your chip performs, the higher chances you get majority of the orders at the end of the day. That's how it works. And I think the other key element to take into consideration is, of course, the public and private synergy. This plays a massive role. So I think all in all, I mean, our goal is of course to leave here better equipped at the end of the day. And the Constellation of Value is a very well put out framework. Anybody in the attendees, you're more than welcome to raise your hand and ask the gurus of supply chain here to give some guidance. If anybody has a question. Anyone? Oh, Ilya. Please, Ilya, unmute yourself. Please go ahead. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, folks. Ilya, industry veteran, 26 years in Intel, and now building a collaborative platform for sub-fab R&D, which is called ISRL. I really wanted to ask a question to better understand this scope and span of current discussion. When discussing supply chain, is it only about sourcing along the chain, or about a deeper dive into innovation in each segment of the chain or some segments of the chain, collaborative innovation, which is also lacking. So in innovation, I'll give you an example of subfab and everything that accounts for subfab, everything that sits underneath the factory and supplying to and removing from manufacturing. This particular domain lacks collaboration big time, and existing equipment technologies, they are developed in a siloed approach. Companies try to compete while all suffering from similar problems that is too hard and too complex to deal on a singular basis. So there is a need for collaboration for deeper and fundamental research. So if your institute is covering these aspects, and if you're looking into these aspects and would like to be part of change in this domain as well.
I can take a first cut at that, and maybe Marco, you can chime in. I think as a supply chain institute, we are clearly a little bit more focused on not just procurement, but the actual operations of an organization rather than the research and the product development portion of it. That said, I believe the framework lends itself to that space just as well as it does to the supply chain space. I don't know that we've necessarily identified that as an area where we would build a pilot, but it's certainly something worth considering if that's where you all decide is the biggest need. Marco, I'm sure you'd like to jump in on that, but that would be my perspective.
Yeah, I would second you, Andre, in that sense. We, as an organization and in our partnership with ISIG, right, we have flexibility to focus on the right problem, utilizing the different tools we use. The key thing is, defining the area we would like to resolve. The things and programs like, the Constellation of Value are pretty flexible. So in that sense, we can cover a segment, or we can cover an end-to-end, like value chain. It really depends on the need. But what we try to do is like same like with AI, right? Part of our overall organization, which is called Center for Global Enterprises, which is our mother institute. We have Advanced Enterprise AI Institute, for instance, right? And with them, we collaborate in the segments of, supply chain. And why I'm giving you this example is because of how we are approaching problems there. And the first thing we do, especially for AI, is really finding the thing which brings the most value with minimal effort, right? So you start the change with something which will carve out the quickest results. So we win hearts and minds of people who are involved. Because we all know that the longer transformation requires time, and then with the fatigueness, we lose people along the way if there are no quick wins. So, you can see it, it's part of the concept as well. But Ilya, if we didn't answer it in full, please do just put any additional sub-questions. We are here to try to, reveal all the elements and aspects of how we do the partnership with ISIG.
Andre, Mark, let me add something to what you said, right? And I'll speak from my experience working through different projects with DSA members, right? So a few years ago, we worked with one of the, I would say, largest athletic clothing wear, right, company based in US. They were at the time facing a challenge around product development because they were doing 2 years ahead product development. For example, this year they'll do 2027 product development. The problem they were facing once they develop the products and the products are ready to go, and it's time to actually manufacturing, so the suppliers were not ready. Right, the suppliers were not ready with the materials that they needed at the right time. That was delaying all their products manufacturing, but then also the logistics partners were not helping, right? So at the time they were struggling with all the equation because they had made a plan but then suppliers don't come through. So I think that's the same. I think it's kind of the same problem that you're facing when product development has done something, but if your suppliers and vendors and however you have are not able to meet your demand in a right way. So I think definitely COV could help that as well, right? Because you would create a COV, a private COV with your suppliers, you as a leader, because it will be a private COV, so there will be a leader, and you go about solving that problem. So I would definitely think from my experience, COV could definitely help that, and I think ISIG and DSCI could help for sure.
Thank you. Makes sense. And again, I just wanted to bring this subject up to see if we're in this specific webinar and going forward, we're covering more than just like Andre said, like just operations of supply chain, just procurement, delivery, logistic channels, and things like that. At the starting point, collaboration is badly missing, and in several starting points, and if we can expand just the areas we cover in these efforts, and like Vivek, you offered, I think applying the COV structure to looking into these other locations along the supply chain might be beneficial.
100%, Ilya. What you share completely resonates with us in that sense, because the complexity of supply chain, it in your industry is huge, and usually when you talk to people within the organizations, they would think only about transportation and logistics, right? So, and as you rightly said, it's much, much more than that, right? So we can apply it in any specific segment. And again, let us always focus on what brings the quickest win, so people horizontally within the organization can start, buying in the whole concept. Because we lose the other people from the organization when the things are too long. And supply chain would be, the least preferable place for people. It started changing after COVID a lot, but still it's not the sexiest thing. And it's vital.
Absolutely, it's not just COVID. Everything we had since then, the geopolitical tensions and wars, and everything plays into the importance of this. Even a boat that blocked Suez Canal.
Suez Canal, yeah. The famous evergreen. Thank you very much, Ilya, for your question and comment.
Thank you.
Sala, back to you.
Yeah, any other questions?
It might be that, everything is super clear or everybody agrees, or maybe, like we missed the target, but, in that sense, like, please feel free to give and offer your comment. I mean, it's super important. None of these things that we are trying to build or partnerships we are trying to articulate is valuable, if we don't get the inputs. And it's all about test and try, right? It's all about pushing the new concepts into action. What we have seen globally as well, that a workable model, especially in supply chain transformation, having in mind is what you, Ilya, mentioned, for instance, right? All the current challenges, which they have not been in the textbooks before. Those who excel the quickest and those who create the most valuable value chains are those who act quickly on testing and trying. And usually it's always on a smaller chunk, and then building the broader story around it, because we cannot get in the complex environment, we cannot get the solutions in the first try, and it never happens as we put it on the slides, right? It's always coming up from mostly the mistakes we need to readjust and then build it forward. So please, in that sense, like hearing from any of you, even if it's a comment, it's valuable.
I think, Ilya, from your side of thing, I'd be intrigued to know for the next webinar on supply chain. I think it would be interesting to get your insights on the sub-fab neglection. and see how we can compare it to the constellation of value. Because the constellation of value is basically a framework. So we can follow the framework and then look at the subfab element in terms of the abatement systems, the vacuum pumps, the chemicals that are causing damage to the world, as one would say, PFAS elements, and see how we can combine it and create another webinar on that perspective. Because this is just a framework. So it'd be interesting to kind of implement a framework with a real day-to-day problem that is faced in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. There are plenty of problems that might represent that. Look for an easy wins, like Marco mentioned. Today is one of the hot topics for supply semiconductor sustainability. These are heat transfer fluids or chiller fluids, and this is as simple as losing these fluids during the transfer, during pouring into the chillers and removing from chillers, and these are directly connected to the supply chain. The way these fluids are delivered, they're packaged, they disposed. If company end users are have convenient ways to get rid of the used fluids, if they receive these fluids in packages that support that no drop or no drip requirements, and repair loops. Tens of thousands of vacuum pumps are out there, even maybe hundreds of thousands, and they're all different sizes and shapes, and every company has their own packaging and palleting structures, which are extremely unsustainable, using a lot of plastics and wood and carving into supply chain sustainability and the carbon footprint, the scope 3, the supply chain carbon footprints that are then absorbed by chip manufacturers. So all these can be easily addressed by collaboration, by designing for supply chain efficiency.
Agreed. Happy to go on the drawing board with Andre and Vivek and Marco on this.
I'll be happy to partner with you on that.
Sure.
Definitely. And Ilya, one thing you mentioned, it's not only that, we have external challenges for supply chain in a sense of, the overall geopolitical situations and, economic aspects, but also the ESG compliance you mentioned. And it doesn't come anymore only from, like the organization within. You have the regulator, you have even the customer now who is, requiring it. And we also seen for some of the large organizations, you have even employees working internally in company to say we would like to be part of this kind of an organization. And then the last group which started involving very heavily are investors for publicly traded companies. So, there are multiple forces changing the narrative as we fly. So it's a complex environment.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Or comments? Or as Marco says, criticisms. Good.
Let me add a few things, right?
Yes.
And it's from my experience, from what we have done in COB with few of our members, right? First, you define a problem, and you're defining a problem, identifying the members, and you go actually start running the COB. That's not the only problem you're solving, because as you go through the COB, there will be additional challenges that you'll come up with, internal or external. And let me share some of the internal challenges that I've seen come up while solving. We were working for a large logistic company based in Middle East. They were trying to solve a problem. So their overall goal was to digitize their services, right? From going on to pen and paper to actually go digitize the whole thing as they'd go across shipping, air freight, and other stuff. And the main problem that they thought, one of the milestone was to actually automate the customs process through COV. So they were working with a vendor, working with their customers, using the teams in India and Middle East to solve this problem. And the main challenge they face was their own employee at the time, because employees got to know that once they automate the process, our job security is gone, right? We will get fired or move to different departments, right? So that problem took us 6 months to solve, because then we had to work with our member to make sure that people don't fear for their jobs, make sure there are different roles within the company that they could move to. So that kind of challenges, and it's one of the challenges, right? There were other challenges about management buy-in, different function doesn't want to work together. So those kind of challenges will also come through as you work through a COV, trying to completely solve a different problem, but then on the way you have to solve so many problems. So that will show actually how your collaboration within your company across your partners will work and what you need to do to achieve that. So I think COV is the best way to go about doing it. So keep that in mind as well. When you go about solving one problem, there will be other problems that you'll have to solve to get that, and that's where COV can help.
Marvelous. Any last comments? Done. Well, look, thank you everyone for joining in. If you want to follow up with regards to DSCI, you can reach out to Marco or Andre or Vivek. They're all on LinkedIn, I believe. Marco, definitely we need to create I want to do the next one with Ilya. And
Agreed.
we can combine it together. We should have a follow-up on that.
Agreed. I think, we'll be very happy to build on the model and partnership with you guys and try to create, added value, especially in the area of supply chain where we have the expertise.
Yeah, sure. I mean, hold on. There's Aftab, you're online. Are you here, Aftab? Can you unmute yourself?
Hi guys, yeah, I'm here.
Hi there. Hi. Yeah, good morning, Aftab. I think even the chip hub initiative as well is another key thing that is assisting supply chain activities, right? So that is another thing that we could also work on.
Yeah, we'd be happy to. Hang on just one second. So for all who are in this call, so I've been in the chip industry for about 35 years. Let's see. I began my career in chip designing, but spent the last 15 years in semiconductor supply chain at Google and at Amazon. And I think most of this discussion that we're having is hasn't really focused on, I mean, I'm fairly familiar with the semiconductor value chain, and then of course, but most of my career has been spent on, once the chip is available, then managing the supply chain of chips to be able to build products at scale, right? And we're talking about millions of units per month type of a run rate, and so different space altogether. Yeah, but and would be happy to share some of the best practices in my experience, and as appropriate.
Thank you very much, Aftab.
Yeah, look
Thank you.
us up.
Thank you very much, Aftab, for the insight. Even we have, I can see Spencer Wall is here. So Spencer, can you hear us? Are you around? Are you available? Maybe he's stuck in a meeting. Spencer
I'm
works
here.
for this,
Yes.
He works for this very small logistics company called DSV. It's actually a very large DSV IMS. They're impressive. So DSV is possibly the best supply chain company out there, managing inventory management solutions. So Spencer, I mean, you know this better than most of us, I believe.
Yeah, it's a very kind introduction. Thank you there. And we actually are the #1 global logistics company now with our acquisition of Schenker. So yeah, I think these are all valid comments, very, very insightful. I think when we talk about supply chain, and as you mentioned, we're really specifically focused on kind of the critical inventory optimization. And I think a key component of that to the resilience and agility as well is supply chain finance and consignment, because that's a critical component related to the working capital and how these companies function. And then within DSV, right? So just beyond the inventory management, it's the whole ecosystem of, what we call lead logistics, like a 4PL, and kind of the emergence of 5PL, which is critical to supply chains today. And that's true in not only in semiconductors, but across all the verticals, right? Whether it's automotive, especially healthcare today, aerospace and defense in the current environment. So I think there's a lot of value in the collaboration aspect of it. And the biggest focus is the data and protecting that data, and how we're using blockchain and other aspects of that to protect our clients. So I look forward to further conversations on this.
Sure. Excellent.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Spencer. This is very, very insightful for us.
Marvelous. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining in. What we'll do, we'll go back into the whiteboard, ISIG and DSCI. Thank you, Andre and Vivek, for your presentation. Marco, thank you for arranging this, and Maria, thanks for setting up this webinar for us to have. So we'll do some follow-up and prepare for the next set of webinars on supply chain with our partners here, so we can actually find out exactly properly what strategies needs to take into plan.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Have a great week.
Thank you all
care,
for everybody. Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes.